The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.
This long-handled brush is basting my chicken. We're doing broiled chicken, plain and saucy, today on the French Chef. Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. I just love broiled chicken, perfectly plain with a lovely crisp buttery skin. And I also love broiled chicken poulet grillé à la diable with a mustard and breadcrumb coating. And with broiled chicken, I like fresh peas done the French way. It makes a wonderful combination, so that's what we're going to do today. Now for both of the recipes we're doing, both plain and with mustard coating, you start out, of course, with a broiler. And a broiler chicken is a very young, tender chicken, about 2 months old. And this one weighs about 2¼ pounds with its giblets and a little over 2 without its giblets when it's all ready to cook. And it's tender and lovely and only costs 98 cents. You can broil a small frying chicken, which is a little bit older, but you cannot broil successfully a roasting chicken because it's too big and it can dry out under direct heat. So be sure the best broiling chicken is a broiler, and they're always marked in the store. And you can buy the chicken either whole like this, or split in half lengthwise, or quartered. I like to buy mine whole because I like to prepare them the French way, and I thought you'd like to see how to do it. You take a sharp little knife and you want to remove the backbone. So you just cut down on one side of the backbone and then on the other. And if you don't have a sharp little knife, you can use poultry shears. You see those curved blades make it very easy to cut. And you just grab it by the tail and just cut up the other side of the backbone. These poultry shears are useful to have. And then there's your backbone, and you save that for soup. And then you're going to have your chicken whole, and you're going to broil it whole like this. And you want to flatten it out a little bit, so you just take your hand and just push it down. And that breaks the rib cage here so that the chicken will lie flat. And then you have your wings, and you have this little nubbin that's on one end of the elbow, and that you'll just want to cut off because it's a bony little piece, and it makes the chicken look neater if you cut off, and that you'd also save for your soup stock. And then, if you want to do something else which is nicely French, you slit the ball joint so that the legs won't sort of pop up while it's cooking. And for this, here's the end of your breastbone, and there's the skin, and you just take your finger and stick it through the skin there so that you can bare the knee. So there is the knee bared, and you can tell where the ball joint is by wiggling it back and forth, and you take your knife and you just cut through the joint there. You see that freeze it, and then you do the same thing on the other side. I think this joint cutting trick is a very nice French touch. Now we have bared the other knee and just cut down again through the joint. And then you do the same thing with the shoulder joint up here. This bares much more easily. You just pull down the breast skin, wiggling it back and forth, and just cut right through that. And you do the same thing on the other side. And then, so that you can have the legs look a little better, you see you have this skirt of skin here, and you cut right through that. And then you fold the knee up and just stick it right through. You see that holds the knee nicely, and the leg nicely in place. So I cut through the other part, this skirt. This cut is either side of the breastbone. And then it sits like that, and then you take the wings and fold the wingtip back under the shoulder, and your little bird is all ready to roast. All ready to broil. And the nice thing about this is that it has sort of an attractive look on the plate, and you serve it just like this, and then when you carve it, you cut it right down in half. Now this 2 1/4 pound broiler will serve 2 people if you just cut it in half and they're very hungry and they're going to eat a whole half broiler. But if you're having a fairly large menu, one 2 1/4 pound broiler will serve 4 people. After you cut it in half, you will remove the legs so one person gets all white meat and the other people get all dark meat. And then when it's all ready, you can of course prepare this well ahead of time and then simply refrigerate it until you're ready to cook it. And then when you're ready, you put it in your broiling pan. And first you want to baste it with butter on each side. And you want to be sure when you're broiling, because you have to go over high heat, and if you use just plain butter, your butter's going to brown and speckle and not look well. So you always want to use, though it says basted with butter, just as when you're sauteing, you're not sauteing completely in butter, you're using butter and oil. So I'm going to put in quite a bit, because you never know how much you want, and you can always save this butter and use it for something else. And then you want to put in some oil. And I'm going to put in just half a tablespoon of oil. And by putting in the oil, you are fortifying the butter so that it doesn't brown and burn. I want to look at I've got to baste my chicken in here again. I have chicken done in several stages here. This is being done exactly the same way, but I want you to see the cooking from all angles. And when your butter is melted, then you put your chicken in the pan. I've got 2 basting brushes, 2, a big one and a little one, and you paint it with your melted butter and oil. This is on the skin side. And at this point, you do not season the chicken with salt, because you do not want the salt, because the salt can sometimes make the juices come out, so that you do not season it until later. Now you've basted the skin side, so then you turn it over so it's skin side down, and then you baste the underside of the chicken. Because when you're broiling, you first broil one side and then you broil the other side. And the reason you always start the chicken skin side down is because you want to end with it skin side down. And because the skin is very delicate, you don't want to have to turn it again. So you just have one turning, and that's all. And again, we don't salt the chicken until the very end. And now, and then when you broil, you heat your broiler red hot, and you broil it on one side for about 10 to 12 minutes, because the chicken takes about 25 to 30 minutes in all to brown. 25 to 30 minutes in all to cook, because they're very tender and they cook quickly. And the secret of broiling is that you baste continually, and you really should baste about every 4 to 5 minutes. And I think it's a good idea to have a timer, so that if you're doing several other things, you don't forget to baste your chicken. And then every time your timer rings, you just baste it. And when you've finished all the butter in your basting pan, you always have butter that is in the actual pan itself, so you just baste with that. And you want to arrange the chicken so that it will the underside will brown in about 12 to 15 minutes. And this depends entirely on what kind of a broiler you have. If you have a broiler that has regulatory heat, you can set the chicken so the surface is about 2 inches from the broiler and set the broiler quite low. And then just notice if the chicken is browning too fast, set it lower. But if you have a broiler that's just red hot all the time, you then would put the chicken about surface about 7 inches. And as you see, you have started the chicken with the skin side down, and then after it's broiled for about 12 minutes, you take it out and turn it over so it's skin side up, and that's the way it's going to finish. Now I have some tongs here, and you just take the chicken and just turn it over. As a matter of fact, at this point, I forgot, at this point is when you put your salt and pepper on, and if you want to put some herbs on, you can put some herbs on at that time. And there I'm using a pepper grinder, just a few little grinds of pepper, and you can, if you train yourself to use your fingers, even if it's hot, you can turn it over perfectly well. You see, it's kept its shape nicely, having on this, the wing has come on akimbo, so I'm just going to push that down. If it's, oh, it's rather hot. If I could get it done. No, I can't. Well, so that goes in again. And this, on the skin side, it should take about 12 to 15 minutes to brown, and set your timer and just keep right on basting it. And you will find that if you broil the chicken this way and keep watching it and keep basting it, you will get that lovely, crisp, buttery skin. Then the reason that basting is so important is that if the skin dries out, it cracks and then the juices come out, and that's too bad. And if you just keep on basting it, you'll never have any trouble. And you'll have a delicious chicken. And now I have a broiler that's already done in the big oven, so I'm going to get that so you can see how to finish off a perfectly plain broiled chicken. And that has been done on both sides. And at this point, you can serve it just exactly as it is, or you can make a little tiny deglazing sauce. And you always want a tablespoon or so of butter in the pan, and if you have too much, just spoon it out. And then take a spoonful of chopped shallots or green onions and put that in the butter in the pan, and then set it over heat and let those cook for just a moment. You have to, if you're cooking shallots or onions in butter, they shouldn't cook for more than a moment because they burn easily. And then put in a little brown chicken stock or beef stock, just a little bit, which gives you a little bit of sort of flavor. And then if you'd like, you can put in a little vermouth, just about a spoonful or two, and then let that boil down. And this is what in France is called a deglazing sauce, and I think it's really one of the very nicest sauces of all, because it's just an extension of the chicken juices and a little bit of flavoring and moistening, and you only count on about a tablespoon per person. And then when that's boiled down a little bit, boil it, spoon it over your chicken, and then you're all ready to serve, and you can just serve it just as it is, or you can decorate it with a little watercress or parsley. Parsley is very nice. It's inexpensive. Watercress always costs quite a bit. As you can see, that is an extremely nice and simple way to serve chicken. And if you want, you can cut it at the table, or you can cut it in the kitchen, and to do so, you just take a sharp knife and you cut right down the center of the chicken. And if you have a sharp, tough little knife, it cuts very easily. And then if you want to separate it, you take a fork and you just lift up your chicken by the joint, and then you can replace it. And this also makes it easier to eat. You often find that people don't know how to carve chicken very well, so it's nice to help them out. With a plain broiled chicken, you have to cook and serve it really in one operation, because if you want it to keep its lovely, juicy, fresh cooked quality, it can't wait. But another recipe which I like very much is the one I spoke of at the beginning, the chicken with a mustard and breadcrumb coating. And that kind of a broiled chicken you can do ahead of time. You can get the main work in cooking done ahead of time and reheat it at the end. And that is an extremely good way to do chicken if you're having a party. I'm just going to baste this again. See how useful this long basting brush is. It's usually for barbecues, but it works awfully well just for inside also. And now with our mustard coated chicken, you start out exactly the same way. You cut it, but you broil it only for about 8 to 9 minutes on each side, and then it's going to finish cooking with the mustard coating. So this is the one we're going to use for this, and this is cooked just about enough so that we can start the mustard coating. And this one, you've broiled it, it's about 2/3 or 3/4 cooked. Each side is just very lightly brown, but it isn't fully cooked. And then you take some strong French mustard of the Dijon type, and you want really about 1/3 cup. And you pour the basting juices back into your pan, because those you're going to use along with your coating. Having a little trouble lifting that up. Oh, there it is. So there, they go back into the basting pan. And then we have here our 5 tablespoons of strong Dijon mustard. And into that we put in a little bit of that hot pepper sauce, or just some regular pepper, and then some herbs. I'm going to put in about 1/2 teaspoon of thyme, or you can use a mixture of herbs. And I'm going to put in also about 1.5 tablespoons of chopped shallots or scallions. And then I'm going to gradually beat the basting juices in drop by drop. And that thickens it up and also acts, you have to have a little fat in there so that you baste the chicken. But you don't want to beat in too much, because you want it to be sort of the consistency of a mayonnaise. And then you crumb the underside of the chicken first, because again, you're going to end up with the skin side up. So you take a rubber spatula and you put, that's hot. You just spread a little of that mustard sauce all over the bottom of it. This seems like a terrible lot of mustard, but you'll find that as it cooks, the bite goes out of it. It just leaves an extremely nice flavor, sort of the essence of mustard. And then we have some fresh breadcrumbs here, and you just sprinkle the breadcrumbs on top. That's about probably 1.5 tablespoons. And then you baste it with just a little bit of your butter and basting juices, and then that's ready to be broiled on one side. And with this, if you're going to do it ahead of time, you would broil it for about 5 minutes until it was browned on this underside. And then you coat the other side, and you could finish and then you could finish it when you're ready. I'll go into that when we come to it. Now, while this chicken is broiling, we're going to do our peas in the French manner. Now, these are just plain old store-bought peas, the kind that you usually get when you go to the store, and they're They're not as hard as rocks, but they're not soft and sweet like very garden peas. But you can cook them so that they will taste perfectly delicious, and it's a very simple method to do. This method was taught to me by my old chef Bugnard in Paris. And with the peas, we're going to use lettuce. That's a French method, and the lettuce just gives them a sort of a lovely, sweet flavor. You can use just the outside of the lettuce. I have about 2 1/4 cups of peas here. And so this will be about half a cup of lettuce, and you just slice it up. This is called chiffonade. Be sure that you wash the lettuce before you use it, because if you don't, you get some grit in it. The proportions in this are not very important, like so many things. And that goes in your pot with the peas. And then we have some more shallots or onions. I seem to be using shallots and onions and everything today, but I love it. Love them. I'm going to put in about 1.5 tablespoons. And then it has some salt. I'm going to put in about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to put in some sugar. And the sugar gives you the illusion of fresh taste. Now I'm going to put in just about 1 teaspoon of sugar. And then I'm going to put in about 1.5 tablespoons of butter. Now now we come to the Bugnard, or the French trick. And with this, you want to bruise the peas with the sugar and the shallots and the butter. And the best way to do it is with your hands, which are, as always, spotlessly clean. Because by bruising them this way, you break the shell just a little tiny bit, and all these seasonings get into the peas. You could do this with a rubber spatula, but I don't think it would be nearly as effective. And it wouldn't have the real French touch which the hands give. Now, you put these over heat, and then you just cover it with cold water. And then they come to the boil, and you put the cover on, and then it's to boil at a sort of a mediumly fast clip until the peas are tender, and that will take from 20 to 30 minutes, but it all depends entirely on the quality of the peas. If you have sort of a mediumly sweet large pea, probably 20 to 25 minutes will do it. And if they're old store-bought, end-of-season ones, they'll probably take a bit longer. But you keep watching it, and you want to be sure that the water all doesn't boil down and you end up with burned peas. That's the only trick to this. You see, you've got your cover on, and then it'll come up to the boil, and keep it boiling with the cover on, and then also keep a look at it. And if you find that the water's all boiled away and the peas are not tender, you just add a little bit more water and keep on cooking them until they're done. And you can cook these ahead of time. I cooked these about an hour ago, and if you see how they look, they get to be a little bit wrinkled, and there's your bit of lettuce in there. And if you taste them, they have the most lovely taste, and they're just nothing like the taste of fresh peas. And I think that if you try this method, you'll be very pleased with it indeed. And these, if you do them ahead, set them aside uncovered so they'll cool off, and then put in a little bit more liquid and cover them, and just let them heat for 2 or 3 minutes and serve them. And it doesn't hurt them to do them ahead a little bit. Now, 2 pounds of peas will give you about 2 to 2 1/4 cups, and that should be enough for 4 people. Except these are so good, these peas are so good, really, 2 people can eat them very nicely. And now we have our mustard-coated chicken. And you see that is browned on this side. So you're now ready to coat the second side. I used to try coating both sides at once, but I find this a much easier method, because if you coat the skin side, and then when you turn it over, you find that a lot of your mustard coating is left in the plate. So it's much better to coat one side at a time. So here again we have our mustard, shallot, butter, and herbal sauce. And you just spread it again on that second side. and then sprinkle on crumbs again. And then baste it again with some of your basting butter. And at this point now, you can set this aside or refrigerate it. This is the reason that this is so good as a party dish, because you can set it aside or refrigerate it, and then when you're ready to go, you can just put it in the oven. You can either put it under a low broiler, or you can set it in an oven at 375 and let it cook for about 20 minutes or until it's done, and then you should serve it immediately. So here's this, which has been cooked and is ready, and on it I have some broiled tomatoes, and so I will just add my peas. And this makes a very nice dinner, I think. And what's nice about this is a big fireproof platter, and what's awfully nice about them is that once you have your dish all arranged, you can just put your vegetables around it, and you just have one platter to bring into the table. If you have a little more basting sauce left, you can just baste the chicken with it. I'll put a little bit on the tomatoes too. And then you could also, if you had some sauteed potatoes, you could put them around, which would be very nice. I'll put just a little bit of parsley on each tomato. Then I think I'll move that around a little bit so that I think when you're planning to arrange a platter, you should have some idea of what you're doing so that it makes an attractive whole. And so now we're all ready to serve. But with this, be sure for your final cooking that you serve it just as soon as it has finished. And now, to serve it, you would again do the same way. You'd cut right down through. It would be very difficult to cut down through the breastbone of a roasting turkey, because it would be so tough. And there we have, this is a very hungry person, so he's going to get a whole half of a chicken and a tomato. And with this you would serve hot French bread and a rosé wine. There, now that makes it extremely nice, and it doesn't taste simple, but it is certainly not a difficult recipe to do, and everybody loves this kind of a dish. So no matter how you cut your chicken, whether it's plain or saucy, if you cook it lovingly and baste it, it's always a treat. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.